we doing today, City Church? Good. Well, good to see you guys today. Welcome those of you that are worshiping the video cafe as well as those of you that are worshiping online. And a few years ago, I was surprised by a downtown blog that did an article on our church, and it was entitled, "Where Millennials Worship in San Antonio." I didn't realize the millennial population in our church, and then last year we did this series of teachings called Generations, and we were teaching on the generations, and I did this informal survey in the room, and I put up the years of the generations, and I said, had people raise their hands according to what generations they're in. And what kind of blew me away is I didn't realize you millennials by far represent the majority of our church. I was also surprised at how many Generation Zs are a part of our church. So we have a very young church here. I'm very encouraged by our younger generation. I hear people gripe about the younger generations all the time, but I'm actually encouraged because you're here because you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to mature in your faith. I'm also encouraged by the older generations represented in our church that want to empower you and help you grow and learn from you. I think we're all here because we want to grow and mature in our faith. And today we're going to call that spiritual adulting. Now, adulting is common vernacular in our world. It goes back to a tweet in 2008. I'll put it on screen for you. A guy from New York said, "Grew up in a town of 2,000, adulted 10 years in New York City, same values, keeping the job, feeding the family, educating the kids, buying the stuff." So this was the first time that the word adulting was used. And I wanted to show you a brief definition of the term adulting. This comes from Rachel Weinstein of the Adulting School in Portland, Maine. There's actually a school where you can learn to adult. I thought it was kind of funny. And she says that adulting, it's being able to take care of those mundane adult responsibilities like keeping your bills organized, changing the oil in the car, and creating a budget. So if you want to take a test to see how much of an adult you are, you can go to Rachel's website. We'll post it online later on today, and you can take the test to find out how much of an adult you are. I took the test myself. It said you have the potential to be a great adult. So what you'll find is that being an adult really doesn't have a lot to do with your age, knowing how to adult. Now, if you do a quick Google search and you want to learn to be an adult, you can find out, if you can find out what people say makes you an adult, or lessons learned as an adult. And here are some of the things that I found online when I Googled it. You cannot make someone love you. These are things that people have learned. This person says, you cannot make someone love you. All you can do is stalk them and hope they panic and give in. I thought that was a good one. Someone else said, one good turn gets most of the blankets. Works for me, man, every night. This person says, exes are like fungus. They just keep coming back. Does that describe anyone's dating life? Someone says, we're all responsible for what we do unless we're celebrities. Isn't that the truth? And then the last one is my favorite one, is that we're all mature until someone brings out the bubble wrap. That's for sure true there. But so we all know that adulting is being able to, not pop the bubble wrap, okay? But in preparation for this talk, I was reading all these Bible verses about spiritual adulting. The first one I came to was Hebrews 6:1. Look at it with me on screen. So let us stop going over the basic teachings about Christ again and again. Let us go on instead and become what? Mature in our understanding. Then there's, of course, what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. He says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. And these are all really great verses to motivate us to want to adult. But what do we actually do in response to our motivation? So in answer to that question, I went to Robbie, our youth pastor. I said, hey, what are our 20-somethings and teenagers dealing with in terms of maturing? And he said, overwhelmingly, people are struggling with dealing with their money. Nobody's taught us how to manage our resources. And after I had that conversation with Robbie, I was doing some Bible study, and I ran across Luke chapter 8, verse 14, where Jesus is telling this story about a sower, and it says that the seeds, certain seeds that he put in the ground, fell among the thorns. And those thorns represent those who hear the message, but all too quickly, the message is crowded out by, look at this, by the cares and, what's that next word? Riches and pleasures of this life. So they never grow into what? Maturity. So one of the issues that affects our maturity is wrong thinking, wrong actions about how we deal with riches, how we deal with money. Now, where we're going to study today is the parable of the talents, because it talks about money. So when it talks about talents in the Bible, it's not like the talent of juggling or something like that. It's about money here. And we're going to adult today and read a whole 14 verses, okay? So buckle in. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14, Jesus is talking about the kingdom, and he says, "For it is just like a man about to go on a journey. He called his own servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another he gave 2 talents, to another 1 talent." Now remember, 5, 2, and 1 talents, that's the amount of money. And look at the next phrase there. Depending on each one's ability. We're going to come back to that. Then he went on a journey. Immediately, the man who had received 5 talents went, put them to work, and earned 5 more. In the same way, the man with 2 earned 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more talents, and said, "Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I've earned 5 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy." And by the way, remember that phrase, share your master's joy. Getting your resources and finances in order brings the master's joy into your life. That's the point of what we're talking about today. Now, where was I? After share master's joy, verse 22. The man with 2 talents also approached. He said, "Master, you gave me 2 talents, so I've earned 2 more talents." His master said to him, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Again, share your master's joy." Now look at the guy who had received 1 talent. He also approached and said, "Master, I know you're a harsh man." By the way, is he right about that? I think he's got a wrong perception of God. See, in the story, God represents the master here, and this guy has a wrong perception of God, thinking God is harsh and isn't caring or loving. He says, I know you're a harsh man, reaping where you've not sown and gathering where you've not scattered seed. And look at the next sentence. "So I was afraid." Let me tell you this, you will make poor financial decisions if you make decisions based on fear. So the guy says, "I was afraid. I went off and hid your talent or your money in the ground. See, you have what's yours." And his master replied to him, "You evil, lazy servant. If you knew I reap where I haven't sown and gathered where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my" what? "Money. You would have deposited my money with bankers, and I would have received my money back with interest when I returned. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. See how it works? Is it the guy was lazy who went and hid it in the ground, didn't invest it or do anything about it. And so here's the one transforming idea I want to submit to you today regarding our resources, and it's this. Spiritual adults understand that God is the owner, I am the steward, and I'm accountable. Let's say that out loud together. Those of you that are watching online or in the video cafe, say it out loud with us. It'll make you feel way better. Okay, ready? Here we go. God is the owner, I'm the steward, and I'm accountable. Can we try that one more time? God is the owner, I'm the steward, and I'm accountable. We're going to break down that one idea in 3 parts. Number 1, God is the owner. If you were to go back to verse 14, God called his servants together and entrusted whose possessions? His possessions to them. Now, I learned a lot about stewardship from pastor and author Robert Morris. I highly recommend all of his online sermons as well as his books. And one of the things that he would tell you is that if you want to be a spiritual adult, you have to come to terms with the truth that you don't own your stuff, that God owns your stuff. Go back, it's all throughout the Bible. If you go back to Psalm 24, verse 1, it says, the earth and everything in it, the world and its inhabitants belong to who? The Lord. If you go to the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 10:26, the earth is the Lord and how much? All that is in it. So your animals, did you know your pets belong to the Lord? You're like, okay, God can have my dog, all right? Well, God owns your dogs, your cats, your lizards. I don't know what kind of pets you have. He owns your food. Like if you eat like only plants, vegetarians, he owns all the plants that your food came from. If you're a carnivore and you eat meat, he owns all the animals that you use for food. You know, he even owns the trees on which the paper was made for the money, the cash money that you spend. If you own pearls, God owned the oysters in which the sand got turned into a pearl. If you own diamonds, God owns the coal from which your diamonds were created. You understand what I'm getting at here? God owns everything. And it's kind of like my teenage son that I want to communicate this truth with. It's like my son, those of you who have teenagers, you know that sometimes they like to do stuff in their room that we don't like as parents, right? So like my son, he'll keep these tarantulas in his room. Okay, and I let him keep these tarantulas in his room, even though they kind of creep me out. But I do have my boundaries and my lines there. Like, who knows what he would keep in there? He would probably keep, like, a wildebeest or a king cobra in his room, you know, if I would let him do that, okay? But I have boundaries, and I'm just like, son, look, you're staying in that room, but this is my house, Jack, okay? That may be kind of your room that you're getting to use, but this is my house, and we're not going to have king cobras in my house. You know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm getting at here? Now, I also understood this truth when, I went down to the San Antonio Conservation Society, and I looked up the information on our old historic home. Our home is over 100 years old, and I got this file, and it showed me the names of all the families that have lived in my home, and it gave me a sense of, I kind of think it's my home because on a piece of paper somewhere here in the city, it like has my name on it, my wife and my name on it, but we're just passing through, man. There have been many families that have lived in that home before us. There will be many families that will live in that home after us. It's really God's. Everything is the Lord's. The wood came from trees that God created. The bricks came from, the earth that was made into bricks, And so I'm kind of like my teenage son in that I don't really own it. I'm just passing through it, And I look forward to the day where my son actually moves out. I'm going to be an empty nester. I can clean his room. I can do whatever I want in his room. By the way, I got these friends that they were about to become empty nesters, and I'm like, what are you going to do when all your kids are out of the house? They said, we're going to get blinds. That's what we're going to do, okay? I thought that was kind of a funny answer, right? And next week, we're going to talk about adult sex. So make sure and come, bring the kids. That should be a fun service next week. But you go from being a spiritual kid to a spiritual adult when you come to terms with his ownership. But look at number 2. I'm the steward. I'm the steward. We know what a steward is. Those of you that have been on cruises, you give your luggage to the steward, and the steward takes care of your luggage. He doesn't, keep your luggage. He doesn't, put your clothes on and stuff like that, but he takes care of your luggage and takes it to your cabin, your suite. Look at the definition of steward. It's someone who protects or is responsible for the money or property of another person, a person whose job is to manage the land and property of another person. And so the stewards here in Matthew 25 were given what's called talent, which is a sum of money. 1 talent would be 10,000 denarii. 10,000 denarii was like a lifetime of wages. And so if you calculate that in our money today, typical San Antonian makes somewhere around $25,000 a year. And if you add that up, working for roughly 33 years, you'd get about $850,000. So don't feel sorry for the guy that was only given one talent. It was like a lifetime of wages, and he had it, but he didn't do anything about it. He could have put it into an interest-bearing account and at least made a little bit of money. And here's where I want to challenge some of you today. I want to challenge you to do something with God's money that he's given to you to steward. Do something with it. Don't just let it sit there, okay? Invest it in stocks. Invest it in real estate. If you don't have very much money, get one of those micro-investing apps like Acorns that lets you invest extra change on transactions. If you read the reviews on micro-investing and don't like micro-investing, then do something else. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to sell you any financial services or anything like that today, but I want you to do something with God's money that he's given you. If nothing else, just put the savings in an interest-bearing account or something. And the master in the story gave money to his employees depending upon their ability. See? And here's the good news, is that our abilities can grow. And you know how you grow your ability to invest and manage money? You do it. You try stuff. You invest in stuff. It doesn't always go the way you want, but try something. Your abilities can grow. Most of us in the room make more as we age than we made when we were younger as we grow in our ability. Now, we offer a tribe here from time to time called Financial Peace. And Financial Peace is the class that helps you get your arms around your finances and resources. The last time we offered it, just recently, we didn't publicize it a lot, and we only had one person sign up. And so I called John Scully, and he and his wife Maddie are the ones that lead that class, and they said that if we would get a group of people together, they'd start the class immediately downtown here. So if you want to go through Financial Peace, what I want you to do is fill out a Connect card, fill out all your information. At the bottom, just put, I want financial peace. And if enough of you guys sign up, then we will start that Financial Peace class immediately to help you get out of credit card debt, to help you manage your resources and work on getting your finances in order. But one of the first steps that you'll have to take to get your finances in order is get your arms around where your money is going. And I wanted to invite someone, a special guest today, to help us think about that. I sometimes call my wife the budget queen, and she's really good at this type of thing, and she's going to show you some real practical tips that will help you in managing your resources. So would you guys give a warm and rowdy welcome to my wife, Jeannie Robbins.
Hey guys. When I was growing up, my parents taught me 3 simple financial goals. The first thing you do is tithe 10%. Next thing you do is save 50%. And the last 40% I could spend the way I wanted to, plan for other things. So I grew up kind of learning about money management, which was really important to me, and I used that system all the way through college, just kept at it. Doug and I met in college, and you may not know this, but we got married right out of college at the crisp age of 22. So our first on...
A couple years ago.
Yeah. So our first full-on adulting experience was married moving to Texas, and that could have been a recipe for disaster, you can just imagine. But hands down, the best wedding gift that we received 31 years ago was a book on money management. And I read it 3 times in our first 3.5 years of marriage because I so wanted to make sure that we got started on the right foot financially. The number one reason married couples fight about is money. And it's also number 2 in the leading causes of divorce. So it's an important topic to tackle. So today, Doug's bringing you the spiritual aspects of finances, but my goal is to provide more practical tips that you can use to start or maybe tweak what you're using for money management right now. Have you ever wondered what percentages you maybe need to use for housing or transportation or food when you're setting up a budget? Financial Peace is an awesome organization, and they have experts who help people day in, day out, thousands of people every year. And they've given wise percentages to help us, as a strategy, learn to control money so that money doesn't control us. I'm going to show it to you. You can see how housing is definitely the largest one at 25 to 35%. And then down near the bottom, we've got transportation and food for 10 to 15 each. So there are other categories there, just to make sure you don't forget anything. Now, Doug and I took these percentages, and we've just developed over the years a really simple budget plan, and we wanted to bring it today. We wanted to show it to you. We're going to make it available online. It's not the only strategy for sure, but it's just something to help you move the ball down the court. It's a simple method, and the great thing is it's all on one page. Now, I've color-coded the categories in blue. Don't panic. I'm sure when some of you see a spreadsheet, you instantly start to sweat. So there's really no need to do that. It's simple. Take a breath. I'm going to help you walk through this. You need to know where your money's going, and I'm sure you've heard the phrase that if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So all you have to do is download the template and put in your monthly amounts where you want your money to go. It's going to open your eyes because you're going to assign money to the different categories, and then you're going to try to stick with that. If you don't have money for new tires, you have to decide, is this because I ate out 4 times this week and I've done that for a couple of months now? Or maybe you have a cousin that you need to buy a birthday gift for, and you don't even like this cousin, but you don't have any money. Well, don't do what a lot of people do, and that's throw a credit card down to pay for that, because what happens is, and you may not realize this, people spend 15% more, 15, not 50, 15% more when they use credit card over cash. So the credit card will give you all the dinners, it will give you the new tires, it will give you your cousin's birthday gift, but it might saddle you with dangerous debt, and we don't want that. So you want to get a plan. At the bottom of this, you want to enter your monthly net income. At the top, you want to tithe off the gross, and then you're going to assign where you want your money to go. Now, I wanted to just provide a couple practical tips because Doug and I use different methods for organizing our cash. We kind of do a hybrid. We do cash and online payments like a lot of people. So when we get out the cash, what do we do with it? I went to Office Depot and I got simple plastic binder tabs, and I just cut them into the same size as dollar bills, and I keep that in my wallet with some cash. Not all of it, but I just put the cash that I think I'm going to need. So it kind of helps me anticipate. My friend Denise uses these small plastic envelopes from the Container Store, and believe it or not, crystal light jars are fun for organizing all kinds of things, but you maybe didn't know that dollar bills fit perfectly in those. So you can organize your money however you want, take from them when you need to go spend out of those categories. And at the end of the month, if you need to borrow $5 from one or $4 from another, you can kind of move it around so it comes out evenly. Now, anything extra that you have at the end of the month, you're going to use to pay off debt. Once you're out of debt, you're going to save for those new tires that may be needed or buy your cousin the gift. But managing your money is really adulting. And if your eyes are kind of starting to glaze over looking at my spreadsheet, you got to tune back in. I'm just going to ask you to download the budget plan, try it for a month. It will just take you one step further in wrangling your money. Doug and I love you, and we want the best for you. And it's our hope that just being practical in our approach to money will help you seek to manage money so that money doesn't manage you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, honey. So that's the woman that gives me my cash allowance every month. And she has a spreadsheet for everything, even when we go on a trip, you know. So I know what to pack in my suitcase because of one of Jeannie's spreadsheets. But remember, we've learned that God is the owner, I'm the steward, and I'm accountable. So let's look at number 3. I'm accountable. If you go back to Matthew 25:19, he says, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And look, someday, God is going to hold me accountable for how I used my resources. He's going to hold you accountable for how you used your resources. I think what we all want to hear from God is what's in Matthew 25:21, where we want God someday to say, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share in your master's what? Joy. When you get your arms around your resources, you get yourself out of debt, you share in the master's joy. When you have the resources to be generous, you share in your master's joy when you see people helped by your giving. And this phrase, well done, good and faithful servant, this is the only place in the Bible where this shows up. And a lot of people apply that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant, to those who have lived a moral life, or those who have preached a lot of sermons, or those who have helped the poor. But actually, the application of that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant, is only for those who have managed their money well. Let that land on you for just a minute. When you stand before God, it is a big deal to God that you and I have managed the resources that he's given to us well. And as you read throughout the scriptures, you're going to see one of the starting points of stewardship is tithing of your resources. Malachi chapter 3 verse 10 tells us, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that's like the house of worship, that there may be food in my house. And this is one of the only things in the Bible where he says, test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. And what I've heard from a lot of Christians these days is a lot of Christians will say, well, you know what? That tithing thing, it's in the Old Testament. Malachi is an Old Testament book, so I don't really need to do that because I'm under the New Testament, the New Covenant, right? Well, actually, that's not right. Tithing was around before the Old Testament law. It was also during this Old Testament law, and in Matthew 23, Jesus endorses tithing under the New Covenant. And you know why? Because tithing is an eternal principle. So you don't hear the same Christians who say tithing is Old Testament say, well, you know, now that I'm under the New Testament, I'm going to go ahead and steal, commit adultery, and murder. Because those, after all, were Old Testament covenant, so I can just do whatever I want now. Well, there are some things in the Old Covenant that we don't have to abide by, right? But there are some principles that are eternal truths, like stealing. We don't want to steal. We don't want to commit adultery. We don't want to murder. And tithing is an eternal principle. One of the things that I love about tithing is it reveals God's heart for equality and the poor, because it's a percentage. It's not an amount. Can you imagine if God said, well, everybody needs to give $2,000? Well, that gives an advantage to the rich, and it would be a hardship on the poor. But God says, no, it's a percentage. It's 10% there. And if you make $500, you donate 50, and if you make $50, donate $5, right? Well, that makes it an equal sacrifice for both rich and poor. I love that about God. And we've talked throughout this message about experiencing the Master's joy, right? And we're hearing story after story all throughout our church of people who are experiencing the Master's joy from testing him with the tithe. In fact, Humby was telling me about a woman in our church that she made $300 and she wanted to spend like $30, which would have been her tithe, on her children's school supplies. And who's going to tell her, don't buy school supplies for your kids, donate the money? Nobody's going to tell her that, right? Because we want our kids to have all the supplies they need, but she had a crisis of faith right then. She's like, what am I going to do? Well, that same day, she took that $30 and she tithed on it. And also that same day, a friend of hers, a Christ-following friend of hers, came to her and said, the Lord prompted me today that I'm to buy all your kids' school supplies. In addition, I'm going to buy your kids' school uniforms. In addition, I'm going to buy these snacks that your kids can take to school to eat. See, she found out, you can test me with this, says the Lord. You think you can tell that woman that tithing is not legit and real? No, she'll tell you different. I got this other friend in our church, a good friend of mine. And a couple of years ago, he went through a divorce. So because of the divorce, he had to move into a different house. So he moved into a different house, and another thing he had to do is his wife used to do the finances. He had to take over his own finances, and one of the first things that he started doing when he took over his own finances as he started to tithe. But because of all the upheaval in his life and the change that he'd been through, he miscalculated his tithe. And he was actually tithing double. And as he did this, he felt a prompting from the Lord. And the prompting was this word. It's like, my son, I want you to keep double tithing. And he realized that he had gotten used to that, his lifestyle with the double tithe, and he was still, experiencing the same quality of life. So he continued with the double tithe, and during this time, God was saying, son, I want to do surgery in your heart because your security is wrapped up in a number in a bank account. But it was like the Lord was telling him, I want your security to be in me. So he kept doing his double tithe, but then like many of us, his property tax appraisal went up. How many of you know about that one, right? Your appraisal goes up. Well, you know what? How much it added to his mortgage every month? $500. So this whole double tithing thing didn't seem so fun anymore, did it? Because an extra $500 a month. I mean, anybody besides me gets stressed out about an extra monthly $500, and he did everything that you're supposed to do when you're a good steward, He negotiated his cable bill and got that down, He, a lot of us cut the cable and just, go with internet and stream and all that. He went down, he fought his tax appraisal, which everyone here who's a good steward, you should learn to go down and fight your tax appraisal on your house. I remember the first time I did it, I went in there, I had guns a-blazing, I was ready to fight and negotiate and cuss someone out, and then I walked into the tax appraisal office and two people said, hi, Pastor Doug. I'm like, dang it, you people are everywhere. I can't sin and backslide at all. You people will catch me. But my friend, he was stressed out. But he kept doing the double tithing as he felt like God wanted to do, as God had prompted him to do. And you know what happened? Is another friend of his, who's also a mutual friend of mine, got him involved in a real estate investment. And guess how much that real estate investment yields every month? You guessed it, $500. This is a friend that's learning that God says, test me in this. You can experience the joy of the Lord. And this friend of mine that I'm telling you about, he's a little bit on the crazy side. And what I mean by that is that he just gives lavishly to people who are in need. I mean, obviously he does his tithing at the church and all of that, but he just gives lavishly to people in need. And the other friend who got him involved in the real estate deal, he's a crazy nut too. And what I mean by that is this guy, if the Lord told him to give everything in his bank account and sell his house and cars, I believe he would do it. And I think God is looking for a group of crazy people to use in this world. People who don't buy into the prosperity gospel that you want to give to get, but people who understand that you want to give to get so you can give and meet the needs of people, because people are the real treasures here. And can you imagine the joy in the heart of my friend who got my other friend involved in the real estate deal that provides for his needs? He's experiencing the joy of the Lord because of a person that it makes an impact in. And both of these guys get to see the results of their generosity in the lives of other people that matter to God. So with this in mind, let's bow for prayer. And as we bow before the Lord, perhaps God brought someone here today to meet him, to start a relationship with him. And if you'd like a love relationship with God that you've never had, maybe you just want to say something like this: God, look, I know I've sinned and screwed some stuff up, but the best I know how, God, I choose to believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sin, and I welcome you into my life. And as we continue in prayer, perhaps there are others of us who want to make adulting commitments with our resources. And it's like, God, I'm choosing today to adult with my money. And it means, God, that I want to be a good steward. And I'm going to actually fill out that Connect card to be a part of financial peace. God, I'm going to download that budget spreadsheet, I'm going to do my best to fill in the numbers. And God, I don't feel like I'm, Mr. or Mrs. Financial, accountant or anything. But I'm going to do my best to be a good steward. Because God, I understand that these resources are not mine, they're yours. And I want to experience your joy, the master's joy, as I manage these resources wisely. So, Father, we thank you for what you're doing all over our church in people's hearts and lives. And we thank you for Jesus, who gave it all up for us to die on the cross, to pay the penalty for our sin. So thank you for what you're doing among us. And we pray all these things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Everyone said, amen. So as we wrap up today, don't forget what Robbie mentioned earlier about signing up for baptism. If you've begun a relationship with Christ and not yet been baptized, also our prayer leaders are going to be down front in front of the stage to pray with you. Also in the video cafe, if that would be helpful for you. Let me show you 3 ways to donate here. I've already talked about tithing and all of that, but since we don't pass buckets or plates at our church, you can donate in person by putting your offering in an envelope and dropping it in one of the boxes near the exits, or you can go online at our website or one of the giving kiosks that are located near the exits in the video cafe and donate there, tithe there, or you can text to tithe by simply texting the phone number on screen, 74483, and in the text message you type CCDT space the dollar amount, and then you press send, and when you do, you make a huge impact. Now, I do want to say a brief word to those of you that are not Christian people, not believers in all of this. We totally understand if you don't participate in that. And for some of you who are mega skeptical Christians and you're like, hey, I don't want to, do that here. Well, you test God at another church. Our heart here is not to get people's money. Our heart here is for you to grow spiritually and develop and mature and learn to spiritually adult and have an encounter with God. And I've seen no other way that people experience him other than with our resources this way. He says, test me on this, and you'll see what I can do, God says. So before you guys worship through your generosity, let's stand up together. One of our customs here is to join hands with the brothers and sisters next to us. And I want to speak a word of benediction over you. Dear brothers and sisters, as you walk from here, may you walk from here as the servants who managed well God's resources. And someday may you look forward to the day where he says, well done, good and faithful servant. You were trustworthy with a little, and now in my kingdom, I'm going to trust you with much, much more. Walk from here in the joy of your master. Have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next time. Peace.